Good morning. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It's great to see you. Look at these giant loops behind me. Nothing like a giant hoop on a Monday, right? Good to see you all. Welcome back. I am actually in the studio today. Isn't that the weird thing about the green screen? It's hard to tell. Doesn't matter, right? But it's hard to tell. I love using this green screen. I might be addicted to losing this green screen. It's to use. It's so easy. This the what you're looking at behind me is a close up of a Theodore Sizer rug. So I actually took I had a thumbnail of a sizer of a close up of a sizer like a crop as the thumbnail for today, and I realized we might not get to it today. So I changed it to one of the other rugs that's at the beginning of the presentation for today's content because I want to blow up sizer into a bigger conversation as well. Because I have his book, right, that his granddaughter wrote. Um, I want to turn it into a bigger conversation. So this is actually a close up of one of his two rugs that they have at Yale. And we might get to it today, but we might not. And if we don't, I'll roll it into a larger conversation anyway. I think the exhibit for Sizer's work, like 120 hooked rugs he did in his lifetime, was at Sauter last year. I was thinking it was this year, and I was all excited, and then I realized it's not 2023. Yeah, tough times over here when you legitimately don't remember what year it is. But in any case, it's an interesting conversation to talk about him. He's somebody I've been talking about here and there on the show for a while because of he was at Yale, right? So both like my husband and my sister work at Yale. We're kind of a Yale family. But he lived in Bethany, which is where I'm sitting right now, where my studio is. So very, very local character. We'll see if we get to him today. But I took some beautiful pictures, content for today, beautiful pictures from Friday when I drove over to Yale University, right, is right near me. They have like a holding space, right? Because they can't display everything and have everything out. But things that are willed to them and donated or purchased or whatever, for whatever reason, over the years from the 18th century until now, I think it's actually 17th century. But they have to keep all this stuff somewhere, and they have a lot of holding facilities, and one of them is less than 5 minutes from my house. So I was in touch with them. I think I told you this part before COVID, and then COVID came, and I just lost the thread of it. They weren't having people in to look at stuff, and it was a bummer because I was working on some projects that came to kind of a screeching halt. That I can now resume. So I got in touch with them last week, and it was really informal, the process, and they looked me up to make sure that I was doing something that was somewhat academic with their time and with these pieces that they have, and um, very sort of spy movie feel when you go into these places, and you have to have the proper ID, and you get a pass and a badge, and they check your bag and everything. And I think like, ooh, Thomas Crown Affair kind of vibe, you know what I mean? But it was super fun. And I requested to see, they incredibly at Yale, they only have 8 hooked rugs. They only have 8 hooked rugs. And 2 of them are Theodore Sizers, and the rest are a mixed bag. And that's what we're going to talk about on the show today. It's just interesting, right? Because wouldn't you think an institution like Yale would be like in the hundreds? They have hundreds of references to rugs, right? That you can go into the Beinecke Library, or they have so many resources where you can go in person and do research. But as far as physically having the rugs, it's just the 8. I guess 8 is enough. So it was a very fun way to spend the morning on Friday, and that's what I want to look at together. I took about 200 photos, which we're not going to look at all of them, but I wanted to be able to go through all of them and share the best ones with you so that you feel like you're there. It really was such a lot of fun. And I want to encourage everybody, like I said, I think on Friday night, or maybe it was last Wednesday on the show, you have every right as like a private person to request to see things that are kept in storage at local museums and institutions, universities. You have every right to write and request, looking at specific things. And then typically the next thing that happens is they send you a list like, well, do you know which ones you want? If it's an infinite list, you would say like, I would like to look at this, and this, without being ridiculous, because it's somebody might have to drive over there. Like for me, Nancy had to drive over to this specific facility to let me in, and before I arrived, all of the rugs were out. So they had already checked me out, and they knew I was going to do something on YouTube and show the rugs, and I got permission for that and all of that. but they have to check you, right? Just in case it is like you're Thomas Crown and you're just going to steal everything, right? So, but they had everything laid out, and it takes like two people to do that because you can't just go into the vaults and take something because then what if you stole it, right? And what if it goes missing? So everything is done in twos. So it is a bit of a fiasco, lots of strings attached, but at the end of the day, that's what they do. They are stewards of history. And they keep hold of lots of important items that belong really to the public, and the public has every right to see and to request to see. So it's something to think about, like we said, in your local area. I would love it if some of you started to go out and go to your historical societies or your local museums or larger museums and ask to see specific rugs so that we could get a tally on what's what, and we would all be inspired to know what is where. I think um, it's just an important part of putting the rocks on the corner of the picnic blanket so it doesn't blow away. So, Kelly, good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome. Happy Monday morning. It's so fast. It all happens so fast, doesn't it? The weekend shoots by. It's time again. I had so much fun on Friday, by the way, when we talked about the Design Like book. I love being live with Kirsten. She's always asking very challenging questions. And I love that. She always says, do you want to know the questions before we go live? And I never do because I don't want to be like ruminating on the answer. I think it's much more sincere when you don't know the question. And man, she surprises me with the things she asks, and it's good. It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me alert. I couldn't drink as much wine as I wanted to because I had to talk and think. But I thought it was a great show. I thought she did a great job. Interviews matter, right? It matters what you say in an interview, but it's impossible to do an interesting interview if the person who's interviewing you doesn't ask interesting questions. It's just impossible. And then the energy dies or flags or whatever. And with her, I feel like it never does. It's always really spontaneous and fun. So I hope you caught the Friday night episode. Olivia, great to see you. The magazine arrived. Oh, I'm so glad. Does that mean you're in the U.S. right now? Holy moly's! Can't wait to see it when I arrive in Boston. Oh, okay, great. So you're not here yet, but it did arrive. Great. I'm so glad. Yeah, we just turned that right around. That was easy. Michelle, great to see you. Oh, you're on live today. In action this morning. Happy Monday. Knitting in hand. Oh, how fun. And counting the minutes. Oh, I'm so glad to be here too. So glad. I was putting the show together for a really long time because I took too many photos, right? And I had to cull what I had and try to put in sequences of about the rugs that I'm going to show you. Um, Photos that really would further our conversation about like what's important about the rugs that I did see. Just realizing I have a really bad, who cares, right? I'm Frankenstein's wife right here. Holy mackerel. I never look at myself. I'm going to stop because that's going to set me right off. Cheryl, great to see you. Beautiful, sunny, warmer day. I've been getting geared up for the Cape too. It is a coming. It is a coming. The shrimp boat is a coming. Big rug fair in Harwich this Saturday, the Cranberry Guild. So I will be there as a vendor. I'm not going to have a ton of stuff, but I'm gonna bring a ton of vintage patterns. People always seem to like those, and I have more than I can appreciate. And I'll probably bring some wool and bring some patterns, like some of my own patterns, and the books. So I'm not going to bring everything. I'm not going to set up like a back. Oh God, no! Like just huge no. Just can't. Not. It's not even like the arm thing. It's like I just can't. But I'm looking forward to going. And Karen, great to see you. Good, Karen. That piece you just posted with the truck was absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. I have not had a chance to look at it. I saved it for myself so I could look at it later. And I didn't want to forget about it. I haven't had time to appreciate that yet, but I got at first glance a real eyeful. That is a stunning piece. Really epic piece. Ryan, great to see you. Happy Monday to you too. From gloomy North Texas, you started your largest piece to date yesterday, inspired by a Yoko Ono quote. Peace and love to you all. That is so sweet. I love John and Yoko stories. I have to say, she's not my favorite, because I love the Beatles so much. I don't like the story of that interaction at a certain let it be point. But I do love that crazy romance that they had, and yeah, the relationship was lots of beautiful things came out of it for sure. Lisa, great to see you. Hello from calm and sunny Jerusalem, Ohio. That sounds pretty perfect. Very grounding on a Monday morning. And Robin, is it really gloomy and raining in Wisconsin? Oh no. Good thing you didn't get that the other day when the event was happening, right? Because that looked like beautiful weather. Melissa, great to see you. My arm is improving. We are now at the stage of itchiness, after the surgery. I'm never going to show it to you, I promise, but it's basically this whole part of my arm, like the whole thing and the top of it. And I have to say, there's so much lard all over this whole thing, but my arms are one of my only parts that I'm really happy with. And now this one, I'm not. I mean, it just is going to look very, very, very gross. It looks like a hollow meatloaf. We'll leave it at that. But less happy about that. But I'm telling you, now I'm very conscious with this freckle scare and the surgery. Um, I'm very conscious of like SPF with the summer coming up. And I noticed that all of the lip stuff that I use, because I like to use lip balm constant, it's constant lip balm, not lipstick, but lip balm. None of the ones I was using had SPF, while these two freckles get bigger and bigger, and they're eyeing those next. So I'm like thinking, I'm going to make sure that everything I put on my face this summer and all over me, because I'm not a sun person and I still have this problem. So be thinking about that. Make sure that the moisturizer that you're using and the stuff, not just spraying like suntan lotion on you, but just your normal products, make sure that they have SPF. Because particularly if you're like super fair and you have a million freckles, every single one of these could turn into a hole this big. Not to be scary and gross first thing on a Monday, but I wish that I understood that before, because I don't always wear SPF and I thought I don't go in the sun that much. I don't think it really matters. It can happen genetically, right? Oh, thanks for asking, Melissa. Linda, great to see you. Happy Monday from warm and sunny New Jersey. Sounds great. And Olivia, you are still in Ireland, but you're going to be traveling this way soon. I hope it's a safe. It will be a safe trip, of course. Hope it's a fast trip and a painless trip. That's all. And Kirsten, happy Monday. Great to see you in Vermont. Nice to see everybody. Catherine in Southern California. It is sunny and warm there, I bet. It's about 80 here. I actually walked. Joss was sick this morning. She's been having a sore throat for the last few days, and it really ramped up this morning. So I thought, that kid's hardly had any days off school. Just lay in bed and whatever. So she maintains that that her throat really hurts. Maybe I'll do a strep test and a COVID test when I get back. But Teddy was off and he wanted to walk with me today. So it's like a mile to walk over there, which isn't the end of the world. But we started off in like, the December in the North Pole in the shade of like our yard. And as soon as we got halfway there, at the point of no return, it was like tropical, miserable, complainy hot weather. And then I was like, oh, there's going to be all kinds of other problems kicking up if I can't get in the shade. I'm starting like coffee and everything. I'm like, oh my God. But it is remarkable how the weather turns on a dime these days. Maybe the same for you, but makes it hard to choose what to wear, even what shoes to wear. Oh my God. But it is nice to have the beautiful weather. I can complain about anything, but I shouldn't. Linda H., great to see you in sunny Massachusetts. We're getting a mixed review this morning. Across the board, we're all getting different stuff. April, looking forward to seeing the treasures from Yale. They really are treasures. Joy, I bet it is sunny in Florida. Great to see you, my love. Happy Monday morning. Dave, hello, greetings from Toronto. Coffee and the last banana cheesecake muffin. Oh, that is bittersweet, isn't it? God, that sounds good. Banana cheesecake. Oh, God, yeah. Joyce, hello in the Poconos. We were just talking about the Poconos too. I have to focus on that thought soon. I'm going to be up that way in the fall for that Finger Lake event. I have to think about that. That's miles away, but still. Kathy, great to see you. Good afternoon from New Hampshire. It looks like you had an awesome gilt hook in. That looked amazing. And it looked like you had some great stuff for sale. Everyone must have had so much fun. I can't wait to get up there again. Rita, great to see you. Good morning. And Robert says, love seeing the Sizer rugs at Sauder so much. I bought the book. Oh, they had the book at Sauder. That was at least not at Sauder. It was a quite expensive book. I think I got it on the website called Blurb. It was probably not so much at Sauder, but it's like an $80 book paperback. But when you get these small run gallery prints of these books, it is what it is, right? You either want it or you don't. And yeah, beautiful book. Another reason I wish I went to Sauder, I was having my other incredible health problem. Remember around that time with the pinched nerve, and I was in therapy for months. This hasn't been a good health year, has it? I wonder if it's all downhill from here. Oh, isn't that what people say? If you start getting hit with stuff in your 50s, that's not good. Like one thing after another, one foot on a banana peel and the other seated, at least seated, if not laying down. Oh, I hope that's not true. Rita says Henry Ford Museums showed us their rugs in storage. They loved showing them. That's great to know. And doesn't the Henry Ford, I know I asked you this, Rita, doesn't the Henry Ford Museum also have the Edward Sands Frost stencils? They did. And I'm hoping that they still do, just because I would love to go see them and I want to be sure I know where they are. Um, Honeyness is cracking. Tamara, great to see you. Hello from Central Florida. Oh, that's a pretty area. That's a real pretty area. Great to see you. Good morning. My religion is to trust myself, Yoko Ono. That is really, really profound. That is quite beautiful. And Jessica, great. Jessica, I have to answer you. I have to answer you. You sent such beautiful stuff from Magpie. Thank you. Beautiful spring day in Ohio. Now you all got me wondering if my local museums have rugs hidden away. They absolutely do. They absolutely do have rugs hidden away. They all do. All of the historic houses and stuff, for the most part, it's there's very few that don't have at least one rug rolled up, and nobody knows where it is. Right? It's like the telephone game with like the strings tied to paper cups and people going, I think so and so had it out in 2004, and oh I think where's he now? Oh, he's not here anymore. Okay, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. So I always think it's better sooner rather than later to get the conversation started with people. Like, where are the rugs right now? Because it's almost like, when you lose something, it's better to start looking for it sooner rather than later. And Rita says, yes, I think they have the stencils, but no one informed if they did move. Yeah, I want to chase those later this year. Spins a good yarn. What a great name. Happy sunny Monday from northwestern Pennsylvania. Great to see you. Welcome. Yeah, it's always worth calling and checking. Send an email, right? Just get an email into a Word document so you can cut and paste it, tailor it for different places, shoot the word out. Can I come see? In my case with Yale, I mean, it doesn't matter, but when I initiated contact with them, like in 2020, the reason I had the person's name in the first place is because my sister is like the head of the British Art Center Art Restoration Department, so she knows the other people in the different museums and different places in Yale. So she got in touch with the person who holds the textile stuff in the decorative arts area, and it was like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, but in theory, and I know that they do, you don't have to know somebody or have a YouTube channel to ask to see stuff. So I was lucky that I think it was all expedited because she's a beloved person at Yale, and everyone was like, "Oh, Jessica's sister." So it worked well for me. I took full advantage of that, and I got in there really fast. Barbara, great to see you. Uh, Debbie, did I miss saying hi to Debbie? Oh no, I'm sorry. Um, oh, maybe Debbie, great to see you too. Maybe spins a good yarn. Great to see you all. And let's start looking at this stuff because there's so much to say, so much weirdness. And you don't know what you have locally until you start turning over rocks, right? And it's easy to find the rocks, really, isn't it? Um, this is a good season too for when I think about it. Just my brain is wandering as usual, but when I think about it, there are a lot of historic houses here. My studio is in Bethany, and around here, there's a Thomas Darling house and a few other houses I drive by to get to the studio. And around this year, they often do like a spring cleaning thing where they put like a sign out, and oftentimes there's just like a box of hook drugs, and some of them are just beyond, and some of them have moths like flying, out of them, and then it becomes a question of can I, should I, must I, will I? But that all comes down to you. But I think at this time of year, more than any other time, we see a lot of stuff emerging, right, from museums and house museums, and it's a good time of year to keep an eye out on that because they're not all valuable at first sight. People look at them and they go, "Oh God, what a pig's breakfast! Who would ever want that?" But knowing what we know, if you watch the show often, there are a lot of rugs that don't look too good that are really valuable and important and worth saving. So yeah, just keep your antennae up, right, for this time of year because we are seeing things emerge from barns and attics and basements and all of that stuff, right? Bonjour, Kelly. Great to see you. Speaking of which, Jay was at the Goodwill. You know how we have the what is it called? We call it the bins, the outlet store here in Hampton, Connecticut, and he found a very strange hooked rug piece. I'm going to show it to you. Just brace yourself because this is it's very strange. I loved it at first sight. I know it's not for everyone. Here it is. It's inside a. It's just red wool. It's not whipped. I'll just show you the back and then I'll show you the front again. But yeah, it's these two ladies. If you're what's new, right? That's it. It's just what's new. If you're wondering if they are gray, oh, they are. They are gray. When I saw this, I said to Jay, "Knock knock, who's there?" Oh, it's your gray friend. Oh, come in. I mean, it's just they're both gray. So there's something going on here. I don't know, but I mean, it's such a deliberate color choice, isn't it? It's like there's a little mark over the hat, and it looks like maybe a stain, but it's not. It's actually I think supposed to be feathers, but it's very strange. Those are your kind of faces. Yeah, they are. They're really very, very, they're very odd, a little bit grotesque. There is something really charming about the way they're like grasping each other's hands. What's new? They're just catching up, right? Business as usual. But they do both look like they're wearing like Frankenstein masks or something. I mean, it's unexpected. 50 Shades of Grey. Isn't that so different? It almost reminds me of the old French prints, like the Mode Illustré, like all those Victorian prints. It almost reminds me of one of these vignettes, but no background, just like that. What's new? And there they are. They have at least one thing in common, and we can immediately tell what that is. It's so weird, but it's so pretty. It's very different. I really like it. That's one I'll never get rid of because that is so weird. I can't part with it. They look like ghosts. Yeah, they do. They do. It's funny because they're on different chairs. Like their chairs are even slightly different colors. Like for example, this one is like a denim blue, and that's a black. So it's weird that there are choices made in this piece that are color choices. But yeah, the skin tone and their hands appear to be flesh colored. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's made for something really specific and I'm not getting it. Maybe this is some kind of an ad I've never seen before. You know what I should do is Google Lens it. Valerie, great to see you. They could be ghosts. It's so jolly though. What's new? Exclamation point. Completely off center. I mean, it does really seem like a not commercial pattern, doesn't it? It reminds me of a fashion print. But yeah, talk about just distracting. The faces are weird. I'm going to research that more. I think I will. One of the staples just fell out, and I thought, oh God, don't step on that. That's a biggie. Um, and the color in the dresses is really good. Let's bring it into focus. This is not one of the Yale pieces, right? This is just something that was found at the Goodwill here, but it's so unusual. It looks like a number 3, maybe number 4, probably number 3. But you see, the coloring and stuff is very good. That's part of what makes it so inexplicable. You see the umbrella or something between them. I think that's an umbrella. Why not use that for the faces? There has got to be a reason. We just don't know what the reason is. We might find out at some point. But yeah, I'm just loving this piece. It's full of questions, isn't it? Speaking of full of questions, oh, Jessica says I think it's sweet, and it really makes you wonder what the story is with the colors. It really does. It's such an odd piece. Looks like they're working on something together. Yeah, it could be. I mean, it looked like one of them had brought the one with the hat, right? It looks like she brought the umbrella in, and she has the same color flower or feather in her hair as the umbrella. Um, it's very strange, isn't it? And it almost looks like the one whose house it is who's not wearing the hat. It almost looks like a mask with a string, but then I thought that's maybe her ear. Now, how did they do the ear that badly and do the dress that well? Right? It's one of these eternal type questions. Will we ever know the answer? If I Google Lens it and this image comes up and it's like a poster for a movie or something like that or a stage play, then we will know the answer. But if nothing comes up, then we must live in suspense and be satisfied with all of the possibilities that we think of, right? We choose our favorite. All right, let's come over here and let's check out what's at Yale. So as I say, there's 8 rugs that are there, and I only requested to see 6 of them. So I'm going to start by showing you the 2. I didn't want to put people out unduly because the first couple of them, the 2 that I said, I knew they would be taking them out in pairs, right, and laying them out on surfaces, and I didn't want to put people out. So I only really wanted to see the ones that I had specific questions about in my head. Hangnail. So let's look at the ones that I didn't. And the quality is low because they showed me pictures. They just sent an email with pictures before I got there. So I said I don't need to see this particular one. And the reason is because I know it's a commercial pattern. Andrea, great to see you. It's a commercial pattern. It's an Edward Sands Frost or an heirloom or Garrett Blue Nose. It's all there. This stag is on a lot of patterns, and the stag part I don't want to say is ripped off. It was kind of a interbrand motif that everybody used and just put different scrolls, different backgrounds, different frames on it, different motifs around it. This one I think is particularly nice with this very low quality picture, right? This isn't from my camera. This is one that they sent. But I said, I know this to be a commercial pattern. It's cute. It's not. It's not going to keep me up at night with interest and layers of thought. So I said, let's just leave that one less thing to do. But it's cute. It's good to know it's there. It's a very flat piece. It's an unusual crop, right, for the deer. Um, for me, the border is fantastic with this piece. This border, like stag aside, and the scroll aside, that border could be like a current card, right? I mean, that border could be on anything and be absolutely beautiful. The sort of color changing acorns, and then that cool green with that darker mossy green stripe in each one vein. It's just a beautiful border. But I've seen it before. We've seen it many times. Here it is again, just different, right? So this is currently on auction with a second rug at liveauctioneers.com. So another same stag, right? Different pose, but this one is reversed. So let's just do this for a second. This one is facing this way, and this one is facing this way. So what does that tell us right off the bat? It tells me that I can see this one closer up, and this looks like hooking to me for Shorzy. So that tells me this one is hooked, really lovely, different border, almost looks like coral, more of a summer border, right? And there's a sun in the sky. So this is seasonally, this has been changed. And the original one that we were looking at that's at Yale, right, doesn't have this sort of indication of weather, but it does have more fall colors and more fall motifs. But what this says to me, the fact that this is reversed, is that somebody did this piece with the shuttle punch, which I would fully expect because so many of the rugs and patterns from these late 19th century, early 20th century commercial pattern makers like Garrett Blue Nose, they were also selling like the blue nose puncher, right, or the blue nose hooker, like the needle, the shuttle needle with the two parts. And people were using this tool in huge numbers, and it works the same way as a punch. You're working on the back side, so you get the pattern and you use the tool rather than a hook, and it's going to be reversed. So the only interesting thing of note for me with this piece, because in itself as a standalone piece it's not super interesting, but it was interesting to me that you immediately go on the internet with Google Lens and there are 100 stags in this weird kind of lumpy seated position with all different borders around them per each commercial pattern maker. So I thought that was interesting, but not interesting enough for them to be put out. This is another one that I didn't need to see in person. It is charming, and I think it probably is a commercial pattern. It's not a very good one, right? It's very sort of off balance. This seems like something that would suit like the bedroom, probably not like a front room kind of a thing. It's not a super elaborate pattern. There is a huge um, desire here to use the white color. And that is always unexpected at this time because I would put this at being a late 19th century, early 20th century rug. Um, these two rugs, right, that we've seen so far have the attribution on them MI. So the number of the item as it's archived at the storage facility where I was being shown the rugs, the number starts with MI. What do you think the MI stands for? I'll tell you, and you can guess in the meantime. It stands for missing identification, right? It's an unknown. So they don't know anything about the maker or they don't know anything about the provenance of the piece. It was donated, given, whatever. They don't even know, in some cases, when. So both of these rugs fall into that category. It is an unknown item. It is an MI item. And I think that language as an acronym is pretty standard from big museum to big museum and institution. So this is a pretty piece. It strikes me the ferns are very, very fine and they're perfectly done. So that strikes me as a stamped pattern from back in the day. So an early stamped pattern. It is unusual to just see the two roses. It could be that there are more roses and that the maker only had enough red and green to be able to commit to the two. Can you see kind of a weird face in this, like a skeleton Day of the Dead face with the roses being eyes and the noses, the no nose, the mouth being like stitches with the leaves and then kind of a frame. Maybe it's just me, but I do see kind of a face when I look at it. It's not a bad thing, but I do have a suspicion that this isn't the complete pattern that's been done. I feel like they had a lot of white for some reason, and um, and not a lot of floral colors or greens. So they did the best that they could with a commercial pattern, and they filled up as much as they could with the materials and colors that they had on hand. That would be my guess. So it's a pretty rug, but again, I couldn't see. I just couldn't like warrant them struggling with more boxes. Now, this one I was on the fence about because this is a very large rug. This is like a living room sized rug, big floor rug. I want to say this is something like maybe 5 foot by maybe 7, something like that, maybe 6 or 7. So you saw straight face straight away, Olivia. Isn't that funny with that last one? Now, this one I did ask to see, but I said don't bother unrolling it, and I'm going to show you why in a second. It's in very, very, very poor condition. The reason they told me that this rug was super fragile and large, and that it took at least 2 handlers to get it onto the table. There's some irony here, and I've got some jokes, but I'll save them for later. So when I arrived, it was already on the table, and it is enormous. So this is Yale's photo, and again, this is another MI. There's no identification that goes with this. They know nothing about the provenance of this rug. The reason I wanted to look at this rug, and we're gonna check this out closer up together. Do you remember, and I know you do because we talk about this, all we talk about, right, are crazy rug stories and what ifs. But we know that there is a record of, at least from house museum to house museum, of there having been a trade where all men would work together in a bee style, like a hooking bee style, to create large floor rugs made in the same way, but quickly and by men, right? It was their job. I wondered whether this rug was one of those rugs, and I am pretty sure that it is. So I can't say for certain, and I did not want to be responsible for unrolling this rug. But let's look at it together. One thing I want you to look at that it's probably not going to help from this photo. You're not going to be able to tell. I'm just going to plant the seed. And again, this is Yale's photo. I'm going to show you my photos. They're much, much, much better. But there are some issues here. Like if you look at the right side of the rug, you see how there's an extra block, or there's a problem with symmetry. Not an extra block, but northwest in the bottom right, we get an extra block because the rug is not a square. You see what I mean? So in terms of symmetry, it feels um, not exactly symmetrical. It is symmetrical. It's a tipped symmetry, right? Some corner to corner, not side to side. But the thing that I want to plant at the beginning of this conversation is the hooking for this rug is very different on the right side than it is on the left side. And even in the middle, it looks different. It's almost as if, as we look at it, one person was seated on the right doing the hooking on the right, one person on the left, and one person at the middle. I'm picturing them on a needlepoint frame or a Chetty Camp style frame, 3 people working at one time. That's what I'm picturing. So let me show you the photos that I've got, and they're not in any particular order. This is the left-hand side of the rug. So it is super lovely, but even these 2 panels on the left-hand side, I can see that we can't judge anything by color, right? Because they would be constantly running out of colors just like anybody, right? And we're going to see that in greater detail because you can see that the middle brown, as opposed to the brown on the far left, is completely different. The roses will be different from one cell to the next because of scarcity or running out, just like anybody else, particularly with these large rugs. So we can't judge anything by that. But I would say, even looking at these first 2 rows side by side, it does look to me like these could be different hookers. Not has to be, but could be, because they are in theory supposed to be identical and interchangeable, and they are not quite. You can see the person to the right had a little more trouble with staying inside the frame, right? You know how we always say, do you hook inside the line, outside the line, or on the line? Seems to me like the person on the right hooked outside the line, and it got into a little bit of um, a tough situation with meeting that dark to light right frame. It seems like they got in a little bit of trouble getting too close to the edge. I'm not sure that even these first two rows were done with this by the same person. Goretti, hi everyone, gone for too long. Oh, death in the family. I'm so sorry, but a little more time now. Oh, Goretti, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope things are getting smoothed over. That's so sad. It's such a sad time of the year to have deaths and funerals and all of that. 'Cause it's such a happy time of the year. You know, it doesn't go together. I'm so sorry to hear that, but I'm very glad that you're back. So let's go to the next one because I literally have 100. They're not all in this slideshow, but if you see something I don't see, let's be detectives together because this rug is absolutely bonkers. There's so much to know. This is what the back of it looks like, and it's a green color. It's not. It's like an army green color, which made me think, was that is that it's linen or burlap? It's old, right? It's not great to have this much linen on the back of an old rug because the gases build up between the two textiles, right? That's not good. They have had a lot of trouble on this rug with loss, damage, all of that. So you can see it's had many repairs. You can see on the back of the rug through this peeky hole, somebody took the time to make a peeky hole. Maybe it was like a semi-professional art restorer who or a rug restorer or someone in the family. The person who started restoring this in Yale knows nothing about this part of the conversation. They don't know who did this. It seems to be quite old, but I have to say the person who did do it had some good ideas. Like they did a lot of ups and downs, but they did a lot of diagonal support too. You see the diagonal stitches? Unfortunately, you can see the stitches on the front of the rug, so that's not good. But the idea of working diagonally when you're doing repairs is very important, and that's what contemporary rug repairers will do. Because if you think about it, if the rug is hanging top to bottom, right, and the loops are there all heavy, the woven material is north to south, warp weft, yeah, right? It's very geometric, very flush. That weight, right? If it's hanging, it continues to pull on it, right? However, it's displayed. If it's displayed on the floor, it's not going to be a thing. I suspect that this was displayed on the floor, but for now, when people are restoring, they're thinking about longevity. If you keep putting more stitches top to bottom and side to side along with the grain, you're just adding stress and weight to the gravity that is already pulling top to bottom or side to side depending on how it's hung. If you do it diagonally, right, you do it like on the bias, then the weight is distributed differently and it's not pulling so harshly on the existing grain. Do you see what I mean? So doing something on a diagonal makes a lot of sense. In restoration, this is what you would do with any textile. This is not a new repair. So it's amazing to me that this person had this idea and just went ahead and boom, started doing something quite smart. They also left this peeky hole open. And I'm wondering if there was more fill in the peeky hole, but they saw it as a vulnerable spot or a spot that needed a future repair. It's hard to tell. My guess is that this is an old rug to begin with. So I'm going to do spoiler alert. My guess is that this is not a hooked rug. My guess is that this is a sewn rug and it's a much earlier rug. And my guess is that in the late 19th century, somebody did these repairs, or the very early 20th century. My money's on the 19th century. I think somebody did these repairs to display it or keep it, but not to use it. And I think they left those things open for future repairs. It's almost like awful, but when someone has heart surgery and you get the zipper on there, just so they know they're going back in there. So I'm thinking it might be something like that because there's a lot of these, heart valve zippers, so to speak, on this particular rug. Now, I want to go more into the repairs in a minute, but let's look more at the way that the rug looks. You can see the color changes where, the diagonals are outlined, right? And you can see that it's going from dark to browns to blues to blacks. They're making do with what they've got. They're using mostly yarn, and it's very fine together, right? A lot of the yarn looks like it has a wool component or mohair component. It looks a bit chenille, right? It's kind of fluffing out over the years. We're seeing a lot of loss, a ton of loss. Those are not my nails. God, if I ever had nails that looked that pretty, it would really be it would be eerie, right? You'd have to check on me. This is Nancy who was helping me that day. She was helping me unfold and unroll stuff. It was just the two of us when we were looking. This, in some places, looks like it has a Waldeboro effect, but it does not. It's not Waldeboro at all. But there is a lot of fuzzy chenille quality to it, and that is the yarn. We are not seeing wool strips with this rug. We are seeing yarn, thicker yarns and thinner yarns, but it is all yarn, which furthers my idea that I think that it was a sewn rug. I think they used that chopstick tool and went rows over the thing and then pulled the thing out and then went rows over the. I do not think it was a hooked rug. Let's look at it in closer detail. Here's the twist. With this particular rug, I think it's a sewn rug that's earlier than the middle 19th century. And I think the person who repaired it much later and repaired it by hooking. So I think it's a mutant of a rug. I think it's originally a sewn rug, and the repairs have been done with a rug hook. So it's very hard to tell with the burlap on the back. I'm only peeking through the peeky holes, but I had a lot of clues. So let's look at them together. It's just my opinion, right? It's just my opinion. I would need another couple hours really to concentrate and think. It's a surprising rug in that this is one corner, right? And we're going to see the back of this a little bit later. This is all on burlap, right? But not that burlap, the green burlap that's backing it, right? That was added later. Um, it's a surprising rug because even on the side corner like this, there is that one stripey of the darker. And it does make me wonder, was that added later? Is that a repair that happened later? Was this corner in general darker, like to match the lines of the grid, and it all faded? Very, very hard to know without spending more time with it, isn't it? It's quite hard to know. We can, and I didn't unroll. Oops, wait a minute. That one's not supposed to be there. I knew I was going to find that one in the wrong place. I have that one for you for later. This is the same. This is the next corner over, right? One block over, and it's a world of difference. It's not the caramel color anymore. It's this more browny color. Same table, same light, same everything. You can see that the stripe, right, is shot. It's just gone on this one. You can see in the middle of the bud on the right, there's just loss. There is a lot of loss. The material has actually decomposed. It is atomized. It has essentially pooped itself and it's gone. Interesting to see how they are completing the rug, right? Because it's not impossible that the rug is hooked. It is, we're seeing all yarn, and the brown is a little bit of a thinner gauge with a higher sheen than the white. The white is fluffier, and I think it has more of a mohair or a more unspun quality to the yarn. It's all yarn. When I look at the motion, right, the energy in that brown part, it does make me think of a needle. It's very, very small, fine stitches, and you can see someone going straight up in one row. Do you get that with rug hooking too? Yes, you do. Do you get it this fine with rug hooking? Only if you're working in a really fine cut. Um, and that's why I say it's not impossible that it's hooked. I want to show you some of the stitches on the back as we get there in the natural scheme of things that make me think it's a sewn rug, not a hooked rug. This is another peeky hole that they have going. So you're seeing in this one, we were unrolling it a little bit and taking a close up. You're seeing the front of one of the panels, really, really done. Like, and this doesn't look to me like a furniture leg was on it and ripped a hole through it. This looks to me like the ravages of time, like the material actually decomposed. Um, Rita says, looks like a mutant to me, looks like it's needle punched and hooked. Yeah, I mean, and needle point rugs are a big thing, right, in the 18th century, 19th century. So the idea of picking up a needle and making a rug in this style, particularly with a floral motif like this, very common. The idea of hooking a rug, I mean, it's just bewildering to me that this rug, I mean, it's a very, very grand rug, right? So whoever bought this rug in the first place had the money, and then it fell apart. Now, if this rug was made in 1860, right, and then someone started repairing it and shoring it up essentially 50 years later, it can't be much sooner than that because of the backing. When you look at the backing, you look at the stitches, that's old too. So it makes me think this rug is earlier, and that's one of the reasons I think it's sewn. Also, the fact that it's yarn, easy to go through a needle. They're not cutting anything up, right? There's no strips in here. But there is a lot of decomposition. It also is on a backing that I think is, you see the bareness of the backing there? I think this is like a homespun. I don't, the green backing is burlap, right? That's almost a guarantee. But the backing, the original backing, right, that is totally decomposing, I think that's a homespun. I think it's a very loose weave homespun, and I think it was always very thin and fragile, but probably what the only choice was that they had. Interesting, right? So let's look at it closer up again, because as we see from row to row, we're looking at a motif of roses, right? And some of them are red, some of them are purple. It seems to me like in the general look of the rug, it's like this whole row is red or purple, dark roses. The next row, lighter roses, right? They weren't going for uniformity of color, they were going for tone and impact. So dark, light, which is the best you can do when you keep mixing up your materials. I have to say, at the top of this one, I see some pieces that look like hooked strips, and in the middle with the veining. That doesn't look like yarn to me. That looks like wool strips. I think this is part of the repair, right? And that does look hooked. And we're seeing that caramel corner on the top left. That looks hooked, and that looks like it's on burlap, right? So let's be detectives. Come back here. That's not the same backing. That's not the same backing, right? You see the holes, they're totally shot. The holes on this, that's not the same backing as this. Top left, that is burlap. So we are seeing another piece of material introduced. This is not the green burlap, this is straight up feed sack burlap, right? And I'm going to show you the back of this in one of these pictures coming up. Just in this one picture, look at the top left-hand corner where the brown is. That's definitely burlap, and that's newer. And then look at, for example, where the loss is on the top of the leaf and on the top of the rose. That's the original fabric. It's a completely different scale, right? So for the burlap, they're putting through pieces of what look like cut cotton. I don't think that's wool, I think that's cotton. And for the original rug, it's all yarn, right? It's a completely different scale of hole, of grid. Karen says, I think the peaky holes are just a way to keep more of the green back from ripping anymore. I think the edges of the holes couldn't hold a mending stitch, so the fabric was turned under and sewn. Yep, that's possible. That's possible. There's so, without having a standardized way of doing repair, right? Like years ago, it would be very different from person to person. It works the same way now, right? If you want me to make your wedding dress, I would never do anything like that anymore. But back in the day, with the costume degree and all that stuff fresh, if you wanted me to make an important dress for you, you would probably come to me because you like the way that I sew and how I make things. Because even if I'm following a pattern, mine is going to look different than the next person's, right? Because it's going to have a slight, just like a writer does, just like a musician does who's covering a song that everybody knows. Each person's version or interpretation is a little bit different, right? So that's important to note too, because that also goes with textile repairs, right? If I were to repair something, it would be different than Judy's would be better. But besides like good, better, best, mine would look different, right? Because I'd probably attack it a different way. Particularly way back when there wasn't a book to consult, you would use your common sense and the sewing skills you already have to do things that made common sense. And it might be different than what the next person did. So we're talking about apples and oranges as usual. We're always talking about apples and oranges. This one is an interesting picture because I can see so much loss of the cotton at the top. That is such wild hay-like cotton, right? Just falling apart, right? It's just falling apart. It's just atomizing. This doesn't look like 1860 to me, right? This rug doesn't show any signs of water damage or having spillage on it, right? So, and that's a big thing too, because it's like how much hard wear did this rug take? Well, I'm picturing the house of a person who could afford this rug, and I'm thinking probably not that much hard wear. It was probably in a living room or a music room or a sitting room, like on the floor for guests. We're probably not talking about super hardware, right? It wasn't at the threshold of a farmhouse kitchen where goats and sheep were also coming in and out, right? It wasn't that kind of a rug. So that's one of the reasons I think it's a much older rug than it could be as a hooked rug. Let's look at some more pictures and see what else we can see. Another close-up of an original part that doesn't have much loss at all. And you can see, even with the border, right, they are really, I don't want to say struggling, but there are a lot of color changes, even with the outlining parts. Now, what's interesting in this shot is if you take a look at the flower, you think about the other flowers we've seen, right? This is the brown row, this is not the red row. Red row. This is not the red row. But do you notice how much outlining is in this flower? And can you recall, we saw shading, like a very primitive attempt at shading with some of the red flowers, but this is from the right hand side of the rug. And the person who was sitting on the right hand side of the rug did way more outlining than shading. Way more. It's basically like cartoon versions of the flowers on the right. And my point with this, I'm gonna show you some more examples of it. I can't even be sure of this particular thing until let's look at it together. So let's hold on that thought. This image that we're looking at here, it's the rolled rug. We'd unrolled it a little bit further, and I'm trying to get a close up here because this is back on the left hand side of the rug. Yeah, this is on the left hand side of the rug. And what we're seeing is some of the shading and outlining of the flowers, it's completely faded, right? You see those ghostly lines that are in there? Those were probably black or aubergine, but they weren't this color, right? The color is shot. It also looks like in this part of the rug that this portion is hooked. Hard to know because so much has been reworked on this rug. It probably is that in the future, when some time has passed and I'm caught up with my personal projects, I might say yes. Can we unroll the rug? Um, but I didn't want to do it on this day. I wanted to do it the right way. You can't imagine there were pieces falling off of it. You can't imagine as we were unrolling it, and it made me very, very nervous. So I didn't want to go too far. But for example, when I look at this photo, right? So this is a little bit of the backing, and you see the stitching where there's some peeky holes here. Some of the burlap has just worn through, but you can see some of the peeky holes are intentional because it's like almost like an applique stitch, keeping it at bay, keeping it held back. You can see the quality of that original backing fabric, that original homespun. Really believe it's a homespun woven, but you can see the stitches from the back. These are stitches from the back. Now, look at the red ones, look at the white ones. Does this look like rug hooking to you? I mean, I can't say for sure, but just the way that the stitches are running, it does not to me look like rug hooking. It looks like sewing. Could it be that there are more than two people or more than three people working on this rug and this one has a needle, this one has a hook? Yeah, it could absolutely be that. It could absolutely be that. It looks to me, it's very hard to tell because the argument for it's got a hook, right, is that if that's true, then this rug has to be 1860s. And it does look older than that to me. It looks like a relic, right? I think it's 100 years older than that. So that in itself for me is a problem. These look like stitches to me, not rug hooking, right? The one thing I will say about the way the stitches look in terms of it maybe being hooked is that it looks like it's hard to tell whether they have purposely gone into the holes to pull through or that the holes have been made by a needle and kind of stretched out over the hundreds of years by the thread that was in them and then fell out. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to say. I'm still leaning way more towards sewing than hooking. More clues coming at you. And you see there seems to be a part in the bottom where there's a color change and it seems to move from yarn to hooking, like thicker pieces, maybe even like a chiffon material. This rug is filled with that, filled with that. It is the most extraordinary hybrid that I've seen so far. Karen says it really looks punched. Could be punched. I don't think it is punched. I think it's a little too early, and I don't think this backing fabric could have suffered any kind of punch that was available at that time. The punch that they would have gone for a rug this size has got to be the shuttle punch, and that is such an aggressive thing. I don't. It's not impossible, but I. It could be why there's so much damage, but there's also so much not damage. I can't see I can't see it. This is such thin stitching. The shuttle punches that came out in the 19th century, like the blue nose, they are thick and they're for bulky yarn. They're not for stuff that's this gauge. So it's not impossible, but I would have to say a different instrument or tool would have to turn up that would make me think that this might have been punched. And in terms of the timeline of patents and inventions, they didn't really have anything that was a punch that was finer than the shuttle punch at this moment. I could be wrong, or we could learn something new tonight, and that would be exciting. But for now, I don't know. I'm looking at the stitches and they're super fine. I think a punch would put a hole right through this backing fabric. I mean, what do you all think? Olivia says, I think it looks like a sewn tapestry and repaired with hooking. I think so too. I think so too. And it could be different from section to section. I'm not, I think whoever made this probably had experience making coverlets for beds, right? And those were stitched. This is some of the most recent stitching, right? This is a part of that burlap that seems to have been stitched and repaired most recently. Now, something very telling that we can tell by looking at this corner of the back of the rug, this is definitely hooking. They have hooked through two layers. They have added burlap to the front, burlap to the back, and they're hooking through both layers. That is still how you do a repair. Maybe not the burlap part, but that is still how you do a repair, right? With the same material, you're just kind of cushioning it with layers like a quilt, like a sandwich of textile, and you're going through multiple layers. And you're using all of these little chicken scratch stitches. And again, these stitches show on the front to keep the two pieces together. It's really bizarre. Now, this is the caramel colored corner. So you see what's happening here easily. This is a piece of burlap that has been sewn onto this corner, which must have been completely shot, right? This is the burlap. You see the green burlap here, and then you see the feed sack burlap here. And this is hooked. They have hooked this through. And you see all the kinds of, even the outlined part, you see all the kinds of stitching they've done to maintain its integrity as much as possible. Someone was stitching this, and the thing was someone was hooking this and stitching it, and the thing was literally falling apart in their hands. I mean, it's such a thing. It's such an extraordinary rug and such a large rug. It must have meant a lot to the people who owned it. That's why it's so frustrating that it has this MI tag attached to it. No information. It's missing its information, right? So that's really rough. These are just texture shots that I'm showing you so you can look a little bit more if you are really crazy and end up rewatching. This is the color change that we saw in better detail on the top left, right? The caramel and then the original brown, right? Because the brown is everywhere else, but that caramel is not. I'm wondering how much more the person who did the repair did with the caramel. I'm also wondering whether the caramel color used to be darker brown and has faded over time. Judy says someone must have been really attached to this rug to make. Absolutely, Judy. It's huge. It's taller than me in both directions. It is absolutely enormous. I'm going to hold on the next series. Did we just spend? Let's look at one. Let's look at one more sequence. Did we spend the whole episode looking at one rug? It actually sounds right, doesn't it? Let's look at one more together. Barbara says green burlap is throwing me. Think it is specific for restoration or how green burlap's throwing me too. So my first thought when I saw it is that it had been dyed. And I thought, if it has been dyed, I'm not surprised that the rug is really falling apart, right? Because that is another layer of difficulty, right? More dye, particularly if it's a chemical dye, like if it's a aniline dye, not good, right? Gases and all that, and sewn onto another textile, and then this particular textile even has like a third layer to the sandwich. It's like a Carnegie deli sandwich with like lots of layers. So I thought, my first thought that it was dyed because it's also quite mottled, and I'm not sure that it's not. But my second thought was that I acknowledged I'm super ignorant on this subject of when we started importing from India burlap. And I'm very ignorant as to whether any burlap was manufactured in natural colors, like the color of the plant, the process, none of it, no additive colors. I'm totally ignorant as to whether it's possible that there were burlaps that were made with other colors, right? That were made in other colors, other than like the straight brown color that we know and love, right? And I don't know the answer to that. So I would have to do research to find that out, because if that is not the case, then we are looking at another textile that's dyed. We're looking at more dye, and that's definitely not good for the rug. Judy says EEP, Eep green dyes in the 1860s were often arsenic based. Interesting, those must have been the same dyes that were used in wallpapers, I would think, right, with the arsenic base to them. Interesting, Judy. I love this conversation. Let's look at one more neat thing together before we go. I have got lots to do, but let's look at one more neat thing together. Um, And then we're going to save Theodore Sizer for Wednesday. So, okay, so let's for the moment. I'm not done talking about that rug. I want to look at it again in the future. Let's think on it. God forbid you wake up at 3:14 in the morning. I hate to say it, my new time is 5:12, which isn't that bad because I just get up and I start doing stuff. But if you wake up at a crazy time and you need something to think about that's not like, oh my God, am I sick? Is everything okay? Is everyone I love okay? Think about this rug and and stories that make sense, right? Because so much of it is what we can see, and I have hundreds of photos, right? So we can look at the photos over and over. But and I can go in person. We can go in person, right? If anyone's near me and you want to go look at this rug with me, we could do that together. Um, I want to talk more about this rug and think more about this rug because I really believe that this is a rug that was made by more than one person. I really think that it's been both sewn and hooked, and if it is, then this is a great example rug that makes a bridge between the two crafts, right? Was it sewn or was it hooked? Well, this one I think was both. And I think that's really, really an interesting. There's got to be other rugs like this, but I don't know where they are, and I don't have access to them. This one is 5 minutes away from my house, and they'll put it on a table for me any day. So I'm very focused on this rug. And I want to think about it more and talk about it more because while we can talk about what we see, it's I think even more important to talk about what makes sense, right? It makes sense that one person did not make this rug. It's not possible that one person, we can eliminate that. It makes sense style wise so that some of the flowers on the right hand side have this heavy outlining, on the left not at all, like shaded, right? Totally different styles. So all of that is really interesting, but I think the more we think about it, the more we learn, the more we read, the more we remember. For me too, with past episodes, the more things I go, oh, wasn't this a thing? The more I think we're going to get to more a more sort of scholarly analysis of like what kind of a mutant this rug is, right? It's like we can't take a DNA sample from it, but we can look at all of the ins and outs of this rug and make logical, educated deductions about what we're looking at. In the meantime, Dave says, from what I know, 19th century dyes contained tin oxide, made silks rusty, made silks rustle, but very corrosive, and fabrics eventually crumbled into bits. That looks like what we're looking at, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. Because if you think about the sequence of pictures we just looked at, the lightest color, right, that either was a natural dye, it could have been natural color. There were some color variations, right, because there were like moved to yellow and gold, but those were the colors that were the most intact. The really problematic colors, right, that like Dave is mentioning, like the rusts, the reds, the blues, the blacks, like all of those are problematic colors to begin with. When you look at a crazy quilt and you see what colors are shot, right, it's always going to be like the purples and reds first because of what they were using to do the dyes. The rug is going to be exactly the same thing. I think the rug probably had a little extra time because it was yarn. So okay, say it's a 6-ply yarn, like it's still a thin yarn. 4 of the 5 plies break in the first 100 years. It's still hanging on literally by a thread. And then somebody gets in there and starts doing these repairs on it. Man, you can tell those repairs are not new, right? Even if the person lived in the remotest part of the remotest state and all they had was a needle that they found between two crappy old floorboards, and they undid the hem of a skirt to get a piece of thread, and then they started working on the skirt with no information, no supplies, it still would look better than that backing looks. It's an old backing. Let's look at one other rug before we go away and start our day. When I say rug, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, that's 3 rugs, isn't it? Actually, it's one. I believe this is one rug. These are MIs, so we don't know where they're from. But I really think, color wise, that they came together. They are cut out of a larger rug, right? They are hooked. They appear to be hooked. I think these were farmhouse rugs that were used incredibly underfoot, right? Like they were really, I don't want to say abused, they were just used, but a lot, right? So I think these are 3 motifs that were cut out of the same rug, and I'm guessing because of the scale of it that it was a hearth rug. And I'm thinking that the hearth rug was shot around the edges. Again, these are deductions. I don't know. It's an MI, but I think that the hearth rug was shot and it was precious to the family, and that for some reason either multiple people wanted to break it up and each have a piece, or it was so shot that one person had had the rug in her possession, or his possession and didn't want to part with it completely. Maybe it had a moth problem. Maybe it was just falling apart quicker than they could shore it up. But somebody cut motifs, I think, out of the same rug. And I think it was an original design hearth rug. I think it was a very long, skinny rug. I think the border was the problem, and that whoever did this thought that they would cut out some pieces. Maybe the person who cut the pieces out, maybe that person was not a rug hooker and did not realize how quickly they would start unraveling, which they were in our hands. So again, there's some clues here, but I think that's a logical deduction. This is one of the pieces. It is sewn in white thread on the front and back, right? You can see there's one piece of it that's almost like it wasn't attached. I don't know how this happened, but if you look at the north at like 1 o'clock, right, you can see the stitching. You can see it's almost like they flipped it from the back because it's reversed. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't match. I don't know how this was done, but it could be that it was done in parts and it was pieced together earlier. I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like the person who cut out the motifs was super um, was an amazing needle person. It might have been a woman, it might have been a man who was appreciating the merit of the pieces and had a vision for kind of appliquing them on top of a pillow or something like that. Your guess is as good as mine with this. But we're looking at the fronts. I think this is the front still of this one. It looks clearly hooked to me. It is truly falling apart as we look at it. I think it's just falling apart in the box right now, sadly. But it's obviously done on burlap. This does look like burlap to me. This does not look like homespun. Um, Rita says someone sewed pieces in the second one, yet they don't match, right? They don't match. They are joined together. Maybe someone did have a great vision and they just didn't get to finishing the great vision. It's really hard to tell. This, I think, is the front of this piece and lots of stitches holding it together. I don't know if this was like an in progress thing or if it's someone who's totally not a needle person who gets a hold of it and wants to stabilize it to use it for something because it's so special. But the stitches are definitely showing. And who cares? I mean, it's still whoever made the original part, it's still beautiful, it's still there. But you can see someone was holding the stitches together more recently, I think, with the white thread, but you also see the black thread in there. I think those are original repairs that might have happened when the rug was still one piece. But there's no reason to think that these three pieces don't come out of this is the same one again. That these three pieces don't come out of the same. So maybe that was the back and this is the front. That makes more sense. Of the same rug. I think it's color wise, the colors are interchangeable. When we had them right next to each other, it's exactly the same colors. So again, missing information. This is an unknown rug, and they don't have anything other than these three pieces. But there is some crazy monkey business happening here, and it is exciting to look at. I think this is a very early hooked piece. This could be a punched piece, right? This could well be a punched piece. This is a piece that was a very simple design. They only had X amount of colors. This could be shuttle punched easily. Um, it's extremely fragile because I think it probably did get wet. It got trodden upon in crazy amounts of distress. At this moment, it's in agonizing distress. Barbara says, size of these pieces. Okay, size of these pieces. You know, I should have brought a ruler. Next time I go, I will. I would say each of those squares is about 12 inches, right? Not much bigger at all. Not much smaller either. So I'd say all of them about 12. I can see that central square being in the middle and then the two kind of star patterns on the side. They don't match, but I can see it working that way as a skinny rug. Because when you put them together, if you imagine all the fill behind it, it could have been all hit or miss. And then if the edges of the rug were shot, it would make sense if someone saw a different craft, like an applique or feather tufting or something like that, and thinking, ooh, I can attach that to the front of a pillow. Won't that be cool? But I think the person didn't realize that it was just going to start falling apart. And then what do you do with the edges, right? It seems like that kind of a panic thing to me. And the fact that they never finished what the plan was might be testament to the idea that these pieces were just way too fragile. Oh, we don't want to go there yet. Way too fragile on their own, and that it just didn't work. I don't know. There's a story here too with these three pieces. Let's look at the three of them together again before I close, and then I have to close. I'm not going to move to Theodore Sizer. Let's save that for one full episode. And wait a minute, where's the right here? Um, makes you wonder, right? Makes you wonder what kind of a composition also. It seems to me like the one on the top, the way we're looking at it, looks like a Maltese cross shape, but I have a feeling it had more echoes around it, more like the size of the bottom one. Perspective thing too, right? Because I'm standing on one end of it. It's not significantly smaller, as much smaller, I think, as it looks in this photo, but it is smaller for sure. And I think they were on the two sides, but you can see color wise, these three pieces I think have always lived together. So interesting. It was just interesting. So I passed on a couple, but we literally saw those three were considered separate ones. Three of the eight, right? So we have the two Theodore Sizers yet to see. Those so two yet to see. And by the way, the Theodore Sizers at Yale were not in the Sauter exhibit. Sauter does not lend. They only lend to like other to big museums and to outfits who can commit to having the pieces for a full year minimum. So otherwise, they don't see it as worth, with delicate stuff like this, shipping it for short stints. So these pieces that we're going to see in the next episode, the Theodore Sizers, were not in that exhibit. So that in itself is exciting because they're just at Yale and they're in storage. And they're not going to be anywhere else unless, for example, the Met or the Folk Art Museum or one of these biggies wants to do an exhibit and requests them for a long stint. They won't move unless that happens. So in our lifetimes, it could be that they don't leave that storage facility at all. Interesting, right? Let me catch up on the so much work. Yeah, I mean, thanks, Dave. It's actually wasn't that much work, which is great for me. Going there and making these kinds of deductions, and Nancy, who is helping me, her job is to take things out. So she's not an academic, right? She's there. She sees stuff and she can make intelligent guesses, but she doesn't know rug hooking from sewing from needlepoint or anything else. So it was fun to kind of walk through stuff with her and talk. I was probably being annoying and saying like, "Oh, in the 1800s," blah, blah, and it was probably really annoying. And she was thinking, "Am I going to get out of here soon to get some lunch?" But I just wanted to talk it through with someone because I was trying to figure it out as we went along and make logical deductions about what I was looking at. But it was a lot of fun. So the two Theodore Sizers that are there, the three small pieces that we saw, I really believe are all from the same rug. But that's five of the eight. Um, Plus the big one, right, that we spent almost the whole episode on, the big floor room-sized rug, and then the two I passed on, the one that looked a bit like a skull with two roses in the middle, and the one that I think is a Garrett Blue Nose or an heirloom pattern, right, that's a stamped pattern. Those are the eight. That's it. That's it. So we will look at the next ones next time. But it was a lot of fun finding. It was a lot of fun seeing them, and I was only there for like an hour and a half or something. But I mean, I could have spent all day, but I didn't want to hold up Nancy either. Oh, that was fun. All right, I'm going to go do some stuff. I will be back with you on Wednesday. I don't think that I'm going to be around for a show on Friday because I think I've got to head up in that direction because I've got to be in Harwich on Cape Cod at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I live about 3.5 hours away. So that would be rough. Mama doesn't do stuff like that anymore. I'm too tired all the time. So I think I'm going to have to shoot up there the night before to make that make sense. So I probably won't run a show on Friday because then I won't know what the situation is. But when that happens, I'll post other videos. I've been posting a lot of other little videos and stuff to keep things lively. I also want to mention before I log, but I'll be with you on Wednesday and we'll look at the Theodore Sizer rugs. I also wanted to mention, did you notice, and I'll keep reminding you because we are not doing Madcap Monday anymore. We do have the second selling group that's associated with the Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club on Facebook. But did you notice that over the weekend, we put in my good friend, Colleen Tiefenthal of Beechnut Studio, we put, I think, 6 of her pieces into the Ribbon Candy Hooking store. She has her own tab. She can add as she likes to, but up to now, she hasn't been offering her patterns on backing fabric, just on paper patterns and downloads. So I'm gonna be handling her patterns, whichever ones. It's not an exclusive thing, right? I love her. I want her to sell as much as possible, but they are in my store now too. And she's a good friend, and these are great for summer. She does a lot of nautical and patriotic stuff, so it's quite different than my stuff. So I have a tab for her in the store. There's also a tab for Diane Tobias Collins, right? The velvet. There's a tab for her. She's got like 3 different sets of velvet in the store. Those are there now too. I'll be highlighting those like in a showcase post on another day. And by the end of the week, I expect to have Kelly Smith, her designs also in the store as tabs. And the reason for this is number one, I love to celebrate people who I love, people who are my friends, people who I'm close to, people who have very different styles than mine, and we don't do Madcap Monday anymore. And I really want to be sure that people who have always been there selling for Madcap Monday, who are wonderful, and always done everything by the book and by the rules, I don't want to punish them by not having their stuff for sale and visible anymore. So I want to help with promoting it by putting it into the Ribbon Candy Hooking store and talking about it and saying, hey, it's there. It still belongs on our Facebook page because that's my page, right? We don't want to be ridiculous with that whole thing unraveling again and people just posting whatever they want all the time and triggering me constantly. But I do want to celebrate my good friends who have always followed the rules. I want their stuff to be available, readily available, and on backing. So you will find, for the moment, Diane is in there and Colleen is in there, and Kelly will be there later in the week. She's just choosing what design she wants to put in. So just know that that stuff is there for you. I haven't put any new classes and stuff up. I'm really struggling with time, with stupid recovery. I'm working on my Magpie piece. I saw the cover to Magpie because it's Judy's turn. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's so good. God, there's so much good stuff. I didn't even talk to you today about the Connecticut Fiber Fest, but there were lots of good ideas there too. It's all coming together. I think at this point we're projecting if you want to be making stuff. If you're sending stuff in, you already started something great. We can always use gallery pieces. But for full length articles and stuff, I think we're projecting now to the next issue, which will be the country fair. So anything harvest, Halloween, animals, any crafts that you would see in a country fair, right? Anything of that spirit, anything autumn will go into the country fair episode. So, and if I know you're working on something already, I've already accounted for it, so don't worry, it'll be there. I will see you all. I'll be ordering velvet this week for your mom's pattern. Yep, Diane's got I asked her to do, and I think this makes a lot of sense, right? She's got like a spring set, which um, I tend to not work that way myself, but I know it's very handy to have a spring set with spring colors. But I asked her to do a dark set and a light set, and I that's how I work when I use her stuff. I always have some of her darks and some of her lights out. And even if it's not an all velvet piece, I like to do hit or miss with the velvet, right? Because it looks so old. It looks like the oldest rug we were looking at today. I like to have all the darks together to make a dark background, and I like to have all the lights together to make lighter fields. So she, for the first time, put together an all dark and an all light set, and I think that is incredibly handy to have. Super practical. Hey, I will see you all on Wednesday. Have a great tomorrow. If you need me in the meantime, I'm at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Have a great afternoon.